In the pre-dawn darkness of November 1942, American sailors aboard destroyers cutting through the oily swells off Guadalcanal felt the thrumming vibration of their SC-2 radar sets pulsing through the bulkheads, the cathode ray tubes painting ghostly green blips that represented Japanese warships, steaming confidently toward what they believed would be another nocturnal slaughter of American forces. The officers of the Imperial Japanese Navy, educated in the traditions of Tsushima and raised on doctrines emphasizing superior night optics, binocular training, and the spiritual cultivation of warrior instinct, had openly dismissed radar technology as a mechanical crutch unworthy of samurai heritage. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita himself had remarked in a September 1942 staff conference that machines cannot replace the trained eye of a veteran seaman who has spent 10,000 hours studying the night sea. This contempt, rooted deeply in institutional pride and a fundamental misunderstanding of electronic warfare's revolutionary potential, would cost the Japanese Navy not merely ships and sailors, but the irreplaceable advantage of tactical surprise that had carried them through the opening year of the Pacific War. By the time sonar operators heard the first percussion of American 5-inch guns tearing through the blackness, Japanese lookouts were still squinting uselessly into the void, their celebrated night vision rendered obsolete by invisible electromagnetic waves bouncing off steel holes 15,000 yards distant. The Americans, reading their screens with clinical precision, had already calculated firing solutions before a single Japanese sailor glimpsed the enemy's silhouette. What happened next would not merely alter naval combat doctrine, but shatter the psychological foundation upon which Japanese naval supremacy had been constructed, proving that technology, when properly integrated into tactical systems, could dismantle centuries of accumulated expertise in a matter of minutes. The story begins not with contempt, but with ignorance. Japanese naval development throughout the 1930s prioritized optical excellence, spending over 40 million yen on Nikko binocular production facilities capable of manufacturing 12,000 units annually, each ground to tolerances of 1/10 of 1 millimeter. Officers underwent nocturnal observation training that consumed 600 hours per year, conditioning their eyes through gradual exposure to darkness in specially constructed chambers aboard training vessels. The results were genuinely impressive. Japanese lookouts could identify ship types at ranges approaching 12,000 meters under optimal moonlight conditions, a capability American sailors openly envied. But this investment in human capability created institutional blindness to technological alternatives. When British radar trials became public knowledge in 1938, Japanese naval attachés dismissed the apparatus as too cumbersome, too unreliable, and fundamentally unsuited to the rapid maneuver warfare Japanese doctrine demanded. A confidential assessment prepared by Commander Minoru Genda in March 1940 concluded that radio direction equipment may prove valuable for static defense, but offers no advantage to offensive operations where speed and audacity determine outcomes. The document, distributed to senior leadership, reflected a broader assumption that technological solutions were inherently defensive, passive, and therefore contrary to Japanese martial spirit. This reasoning contained a fatal flaw. It confused the nature of a tool with the philosophy of its employment.
Meanwhile, American industry was transforming radar from experimental curiosity into mass-produced weapon system. The Radiation Laboratory at MIT, established in October 1940 with an initial budget of $455,000, employed over 4,000 scientists and engineers by 1943, producing refinements in microwave technology that reduced antenna size from 12 feet to 30 inches while doubling effective range. Manufacturing capacity expanded explosively. Western Electric's Kearney plant alone produced 800 radar units monthly by mid-1942, each costing approximately $8,000, but delivering detection capabilities that would have required 50 trained lookouts working in perfect coordination. The Mark 8 fire control radar, integrated into destroyers throughout 1942, allowed gunnery officers to engage targets in total darkness at ranges exceeding 20,000 yards with accuracy previously achievable only in daylight. Installation required 72 man-hours per vessel, operator training consumed 240 hours, and maintenance demanded constant attention from specialized technicians who were themselves in short supply. Yet the tactical advantages justified every hour and dollar spent. American doctrine evolved to exploit these capabilities. Night surface actions, previously avoided due to catastrophic friendly fire risks, became deliberate offensive operations. Destroyer squadrons equipped with radar could coordinate attacks with precision, maintaining formation integrity, while Japanese counterparts blundered through the darkness, relying on flares, searchlights, and visual identification that telegraphed their positions to enemy gunners already tracking them electronically. The Japanese did not entirely ignore radar development. The Naval Technical Research Institute at Yokosuka began experimental work on Type 21 air search radar in 1941, installing prototype units aboard battleships Issei and Hyuga by August 1942. Performance proved mediocre. Detection range against aircraft averaged 40 kilometers, surface contacts appeared at half that distance, and false returns from rain squalls cluttered screens so badly that operators frequently shut down the equipment entirely. Production capacity remained minuscule. By December 1942, only 38 vessels in the entire combined fleet carried any radar whatsoever, and most sets functioned purely for air warning, lacking the precision necessary for gunnery control. Institutional resistance compounded technical limitations. Captain Toshikazu Omai, serving aboard cruiser Chokai during the Solomons campaign, later recalled that radar operators were regarded as technical specialists of inferior status. Not trusted with tactical decisions, their reports often ignored by bridge officers who preferred their own observations. This organizational failure meant that even when Japanese radar detected approaching enemies, the information failed to translate into effective defensive action because commanders literally did not believe what their screens were telling them.
The collision between Japanese confidence and American technology came violently on the night of November 13, 1942, during what historians would label the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. Japanese Rear Admiral Hiroki Abe commanded a bombardment force centered on battleships Hiei and Kirishima, 13 warships assigned to shell Henderson Field into oblivion before dawn. The force had trained extensively for night operations, crews drilled endlessly in visual communication using blinker lights, and gunners prepared high-explosive shells specifically for shore bombardment rather than ship-to-ship combat. American Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan, leading a desperate defensive force of 13 destroyers and cruisers, possessed inferior firepower but superior information. His destroyers carried SG surface search radar, capable of detecting large vessels at 24,000 yards, providing nearly 15 minutes of advance warning at typical engagement speeds. At 01:24 hours, radar operators aboard USS Helena detected Abe's force approaching from the northwest, exact range 27,000 yards. The information passed instantly to Callahan's flagship, allowing American ships to maneuver into attack positions while Japanese lookouts still scanned empty horizons. What followed was chaos, but chaos shaped by information asymmetry. American destroyers launched torpedo attacks guided by radar-bearing data, their weapons running hot through the darkness toward targets whose crews remained oblivious to the threat. Japanese ships, expecting to detect enemies visually before engagement, found themselves suddenly illuminated by star shells fired from positions their lookouts had not identified. The cruiser Atlanta took rapid fire from multiple Japanese vessels at ranges below 4,000 yards, close enough that muzzle flashes lit the water between opposing forces, the acrid copper smell of cordite mixing with fuel oil leaking from ruptured bunkers. Sailors on both sides experienced the terrifying confusion of close-quarters battle, where friend and enemy became indistinguishable, but Americans maintained coherent tactical awareness through electronic coordination, while Japanese commanders struggled to assemble accurate pictures of the battlefield from conflicting visual reports. Hiei absorbed over 50 shell hits, including several 5-inch rounds that penetrated her steering gear, leaving the battleship circling helplessly until dawn when American aircraft finished her off. 1,300 Japanese sailors died that night. American casualties exceeded 700, but Henderson Field remained operational and Japanese bombardment plans lay shattered. The engagement exposed not merely technological inferiority, but systemic failure. Japanese post-action analysis, conducted by Captain Yasumi Doi aboard the light cruiser Sendai, noted with bitter clarity that enemy vessels appeared to possess advanced knowledge of our approach and dispositions, initiating coordinated attacks from positions we had not detected. Our visual methods proved inadequate to the tactical situation. The report dated November 20th recommended urgent installation of improved search radar across the fleet, but implementation lagged hopelessly behind operational demands. Japan's electronics industry, already strained producing aircraft radios and submarine detection equipment, lacked capacity to manufacture precision radar components at scale. Magnetron production totaled fewer than 100 units monthly, compared to American output exceeding 3,000. Copper shortages limited antenna construction, and the skilled technicians necessary for installation and maintenance were constantly diverted to repair battle damage on vessels limping back from the Solomons.
Even as Japanese engineers struggled to close the technology gap, American capabilities surged ahead. The Mark 13 radar, introduced in early 1943, provided fire control accurate enough to hit maneuvering destroyers at 18,000 yards in pitch darkness, transforming night combat from confused melee into calculated execution. Training doctrine evolved in parallel. By mid-1943, every American destroyer officer underwent 80 hours of radar interpretation training, learning to read screen returns like musical notation, distinguishing between genuine contacts, weather phenomena, and electronic interference. Japanese night optics, once a source of immense pride, became a liability because commanders continued to trust human observation over mechanical sensors even after repeated tactical failures demonstrated the obsolescence of that approach. In February 1943, during the evacuation of Guadalcanal, Japanese destroyers attempting nocturnal supply runs found themselves consistently intercepted by radar-guided American forces despite careful planning and deceptive routing. The psychological impact proved devastating. Japanese sailors who had spent years cultivating confidence in their night-fighting superiority now entered every darkness with dread, knowing enemies could see them while they remained blind. The broader implications extended far beyond individual engagements. Radar fundamentally altered the calculus of naval warfare, making darkness no longer an ally, but merely another operational environment where technological advantage determined outcomes. Japanese doctrine, built on assumptions of optical parity or superiority, collapsed when those assumptions proved false. The combined fleet attempted tactical adaptations, emphasizing daytime engagements where radar provided less overwhelming advantage, but this defensive posture surrendered the initiative and allowed American forces to dictate engagement terms. By 1944, even Japanese commanders who had initially dismissed radar as dishonorable crutch were desperately requesting installations, but by then the industrial and technical gap had grown unbridgeable. American radar manufacturing had become a mature industry, producing 10,000 sets annually across 24 types, optimized for specific functions, while Japanese production remained experimental, plagued by component failures, and utterly inadequate to equip a fleet hemorrhaging vessels faster than replacements could be constructed. The contempt Japanese officers had expressed toward radar in 1940 reflected not stupidity but cultural myopia, the inability of a successful military tradition to recognize when foundational assumptions had become obsolete. Decades of investment in human training and optical technology had produced genuine tactical advantages that worked brilliantly until they didn't, and the institutional structures that had fostered that excellence became obstacles to adaptation once technological paradigms shifted. The American advantage stemmed not from superior engineering alone, but from organizational flexibility that allowed rapid doctrine development and industrial capacity that could translate prototype into mass production within months. Japanese officers laughed at radar because they could not imagine invisible waves replacing the cultivated expertise of veteran sailors. But war respects neither tradition nor pride, only effectiveness measured in tonnage sunk and battles won. As the war ground towards its inevitable conclusion, the radar that Japanese commanders had dismissed became ubiquitous, mounted on every American warship, from destroyer to aircraft carrier, guiding fighters to intercept raids, directing gunfire against kamikaze attackers, and mapping enemy coastlines for amphibious assaults. The technology that began as curiosity ended as necessity, and navies that failed to adopt it simply ceased to contest control of the seas. The lesson extended far beyond mere gadgetry. Victory flows to forces capable of recognizing paradigm shifts before institutional momentum carries them past the point of effective response. Japanese officers stopped laughing after their fleet burned in the darkness, but by then the war was already lost, one radar contact at a time.